This is life, and what a good time to be alive. Remember what a glory it is to be alive right now.
We're just going to relax into it.
Nice idea.
And then usually how we start, if you can just take a few deep breaths in. And then just tell us how you're feeling right now.
I feel pretty good. I feel a certain amount of like low-level anxiousness of being on camera. Hi. Because I'm not that used to it, which I imagine most people probably experience in this kind of situation. That is experienced in the diaphragm, very kind of centralized in that area. But acknowledging it is a way of kind of transcending it, I guess, a little bit. Not that I expect it to completely disappear, but maybe to get used to it and then move forward with the rest. So yeah, generally I feel pretty good. I had a nice day so far.
That's really interesting how you described the way you're feeling, because I feel like normally a lot of people wouldn't necessarily be able to describe a physical sensation.
Yeah, I do find there's definitely like there are ways, if you can kind of take your awareness to where that might be, that you can be like, okay, yes, it's here.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, this is me, I feel anxious.
Yeah.
I don't really recognize it as like, I feel anxious. I recognize it more as like, there is anxiousness here.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll be able to kind of find where it is. And that might take longer sometimes than it might not others.
Do you think like you do that, is that a normal way for you to?
I think so, more and more over time. Like, because I don't think that kind of thing necessarily stops. That I don't think there's necessarily a point at which you're like, oh yeah, I just don't feel anxiousness.
Yeah.
I think that, more it's okay for anxiousness to be there, and there's a way that it's like, okay, so I recognize anxiousness, and then rather than playing into my own anxiousness, I can be like, okay, this is just something that's coming up in this stage, so it doesn't have to direct my behavior or anything. I can be like, sit back, particularly when you are not that desperate to need to involve yourself in a moment too much. So if you're willing to just take a moment back, no matter what your settings are, which it might be difficult if you're with a group of people and you're thinking like, oh, I need to involve myself somehow with this. But if you're willing to kind of just take a step back and just see where that anxiousness is, and then once there's a place for it, it can just kind of be there. I don't even need it to go. Yeah. It can stay if it wants to.
Yeah. Accept it.
Okay. It's like, okay, there's a little space for you here.
Yeah.
Or here, or here, or here, wherever. It's okay. So yeah, I think that's been a tool that I've used over the past few years, probably, to learn to live with anxiety.
Nice. How, like, I feel like that isn't necessarily a tool that you've used.
I think it's a tool that, not when I was younger.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely something that has developed.
Yeah. And how did you basically like discover it or come across or recognize like that you can have that distance between what you're feeling physically?
I think that.
I mean, this might be a huge kettle of fish.
It probably is.
Yeah.
I think there's probably more than one way that happened.
Yeah.
Like a whole kind of series of things that have kind of come towards that.
Cool.
I think going to therapy was a big part of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, definitely.
So when did you do that?
I started going to therapy about 2.5 years ago, and I went for about 9 months.
Okay.
during a period which was really difficult for me. I was in a relationship with someone who I cared very deeply for, and we were kind of at a loggerheads. It wasn't really, the communication wasn't really there, and I think that I was also quite fairly heavily involved with cocaine at the time, and that doesn't necessarily work well with my particular set of hormones and chemicals that work in my body. So when I am taking a lot of something like cocaine, or cocaine in particular, my mental state definitely struggled with that, and some of my behaviours started to get a little bit, it challenged me. I was being challenged by my own behaviour, as it were. Like, I was doing things that I was just like, I couldn't make sense of, and it was totally overwhelming. And then I started to get really, really anxious, particularly with like social situations. And then my partner at the time, her and her friends, they had a big group of friends who like really enjoyed partying, and like cocaine was kind of a part of that whole thing. And so that was a big part of how we socialized. And as I started to develop a really bad relationship with cocaine, in that I didn't really know how to exist within that group without taking it. So I was kind of feeling like I kind of had to keep up, as it were, to do that. And then I did something, I almost cheated on my girlfriend at the time. I ended up in bed with this lady, and I kind of put it on her a bit. So that's one way of describing it. And she rejected my advances. And then I went home and I told my girlfriend at the time, like, straight away. And that caused, obviously, like some upset. And I couldn't express why had this happened. There was no real sense to me of like why this had happened or anything. I couldn't express it. So I felt like it wasn't me, as it were, or whatever. And when she really wanted an answer from me, like, why did you do this? And I didn't have an answer. And that disparity of not having an answer was really overwhelming, because I knew that inside me there was an answer, but I couldn't access it. And that made me feel really out of control. So it was like, there is something here, there's a reasoning behind this, whether it's, that we're having our difficulties and there was some kind of need that wasn't being met within me or anything. But I just couldn't express that. And I felt like I was losing my mind, like, completely. Like, I remember having a conversation with her just on the day that it happened, and being like, internally, like, this huge fight going on inside me. And like, that was a point when I felt like I was like losing my mind, as it were. So I was like, I have to get help. And then my mum knew a therapist who she had seen, who she recommended to me, who's this amazing like lady who happened to live 2 streets away from my partner at the time. And I started seeing her, and that was a really pivotal moment in the last few years, really. She was an amazing woman, this therapist, and she helped me. She was there for me in a way that I hadn't really experienced that much before. So there was this sense that like she was helping you to realize things and to bring you towards some kind of realization, but actually there was also this sense that like she was kind of not there, almost. She was just creating this space for you to be able to come into it. And she helped me to re-establish my own sense of self-worth and value, and to realize that there were needs that I had that not only weren't being met within the relationship that I was being, but that I wasn't meeting myself. Or wasn't accessing, or wasn't even paying attention to. and she made it okay for me to be vulnerable and to be weak.
Is that something that you think you, like, maybe one of the needs you weren't allowing yourself to be? Or...
Yeah, I think that probably it isn't the case, but how I perceived my partner and her friends were to be these very strong characters that I didn't ever really perceive as being weak.
Yeah.
So in order for me to fit in with that, there was maybe a sense that I felt that I had to remain strong within that. And it maybe they were really nice people. I'm sure that had I allowed myself to be vulnerable, there was also a space for that. But I wasn't necessarily grown or mature enough to understand that space would evolve if I had opened it up myself.
Yeah.
So to me, or at that time, that space didn't exist for me. She created that space for me, and that was my first experience of psychotherapy, and it was really really interesting because I don't know what I really expected therapy to be, but she was an artist, the therapist, and she was really holistic. So there was two really memorable sessions, or one where I was she was doing body work, as it were, so accessing okay, if there's a memory stored somewhere in your body, can you access somewhere in the body, and you kind of let yourself go into your body, you find it, and then okay, does that have a noise, and then allowing time for that to create, for a noise to come within that, and then feeling where it moves. So just creating so much space to allow that a process to happen physically, which is maybe a mental state, but recognizing that there's a physical element to that, and perhaps the process of release within that has something to do with allowing it to physically manifest. It's almost like a ritual, like how people have those kind of rituals for release like that.
That sounds amazing.
So that was a really, I threw up that time, in a therapy session, and she was encouraging me to throw up in the process. As it was becoming stronger and stronger. She didn't want you to stop, or she didn't want me to stop before I fully went through what I was going through, because she understands the power of that release. So as it was coming up, I was gagging, and she's there cheering me on almost, to throw up. And in the throwing up is that mental or emotional scarring or anything that needed to come up was given a physical property, and the vomiting allowed that to be vomited up, as it were.
A complete release.
It was fascinating. That was really, and then the other memorable time was when I went there and she recognised that I didn't really want to talk that day, and then we sat in silence for 45 minutes.
Wow.
And she used her Tibetan singing bowls a little bit, and didn't ask anything of me. Allowed that to be also okay with. So I started to learn to listen to my own needs more in the moment, as to okay, what do I need now? And what I need now might be completely different to what I need in a couple of hours or a couple of months or a couple of weeks. But to be allowed for all those things to be okay. Yeah,
and I suppose also, so thoughts gone.
We've totally drifted away from that anxiety thing. It's I don't know how you would.
No, it's good. I think it's amazing the thing that you say about physical sensations and related to events.
Therapy is also not cheap. Private therapy. Therapy
true.
is sadly
so
not cheap, so it's not actually that accessible to people. And as a preventative, as opposed to something that's to fix, I think that it has true value, real value in that.
Yeah. I think it's amazing that you went in the first place, because I know there's a stigma around seeing a therapist.
Yeah, I think that I never really felt that so much. I think maybe I did kind of subconsciously, because otherwise why hadn't I, decided to do that before? As to when I was experiencing that kind of thing. Yeah. But basically, I had some suicidal thoughts, as it were, in the process, just before I saw her, and that's when I was okay, now I need some help.
Now is the time.
And probably there must be an element of stigma around that, which stopped me from recognizing that having access to that may have been a way of not getting to that part in the first place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was lucky. Like, I don't know, I went and I kind of started expressing this stuff to my mum, and she was able to be like, this is pretty normal. And like, you know, like, it's not normal for at some point in your life to be basically having some kind of breakdown.
Yeah, so,
you know, like...
Yeah, you had that support.
Yeah, and she was just like, I know this great woman that can help you with this. So suddenly it was like, oh, okay, I don't have to continue, like, you know, letting this kind of like get bigger and bigger in my head.
Yeah.
I can just be like, okay, this is something that isn't great at this time, but it's manageable, and it can be something that you can
That's so cool.
Work on.
So do you think did the therapy like carve a certain path for you? Like, did it lead to other changes? And
yeah, it was interesting. At like a fairly similar time, I had started to become interested in the teachings and the lessons of like a particular big guru. And the timings of those two things were aligned. I wouldn't say that what I was listening to, or I attended this like 5-day silent retreat in Bethnal Green with this particular chap, and I wouldn't say that the two were completely aligned, but they were coming from a very similar kind of person-centered approach. So that time definitely was like quite an auspicious time for me to be starting to look at the world in a different way, or to look at myself in a different way. And so the stuff that I was gaining my own experience from, I was able to bring to her and feel safe that I could bring and talk to that. And whilst she didn't necessarily, she would come from a different place, I suppose. So it wouldn't be her job to say like, yes, this is right. This is the way. This is the way. This is the way. Yeah. More, she's like, this is good that you can express these things, and she would actually challenge me on a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who's the guru?
It is a chap called Muji, who there was a guy, I guess it's like 3 years ago, called Prince EA. Okay. Who I just saw like a video pop up on YouTube that he had been basically having a talk. It was around the time of there was like the police brutality happening. I think it was in Ferguson, a part of the state, something like that. And he just was having a talk to whoever was on camera, his friend or whatever, and he gave like a really insightful understanding about what police brutality was, or was how it was kind of the segregation and how that was being expressed in that particular part of the country. And I found that really interesting, so I started following him, and it turned out he was a poet, and he had some really interesting poetry, and he was doing these really interesting visuals about it. And I was like, well, this guy's pretty cool. And then he posted something about this guy Muji, and then it was like the first video I watched of this guy that I was just like, wow, this is super interesting, because he basically comes from non-duality teachings. He's he comes from the lineage of a guy called Papaji, who was directly taught by Sri Ramana Maharshi. Nice. So it was like those same teachings, which obviously have some stems from the Hindu religion, but they don't follow any particular. You don't have to be practicing any certain way in order for you to be accepted within those. There's no religious practice, as it were. It was just pointing back to you. And that was the first time that I was pointed to any kind of divinity perhaps being inside you, as opposed to being outside of you. Because I was never really captured by religion. But always felt that there was something very magical about existence. So that was like the first time that I didn't have to I didn't have to believe in anything. I was just pointed back to experience. You know what it. You don't need God or any of these things to explain what this magical feelings are. You can feel it within yourself.
Yes.
It's there already.
Love it.
And that then I saw this guy Muji, and then I just looked him up, and then I saw that he was coming to London and he was doing a 5-day silent retreat in Bethnal Green Town Hall, and I went to that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't really talk about what you experience in these things because there's no way of expressing them really, but effectively there was a moment when the whole room lit up in bright gold, and it was like this crazy shining light, and his physical form started shape shifting into like a warrior, and like he was completely changing, and I was just sitting there like looking around me like, is anyone else seeing this? Because I went completely on my own as well, so I went completely silent for the whole time. I didn't speak to anyone really in that whole time. And so
was it a silent retreat?
It was it's what's called satsang. So effectively everyone's silent apart from the person that comes to ask a question. So he comes on, it's totally unscripted. He comes to the stage, and then he just opens the questions up, the floor up for anyone to come and ask any kind of really deep, burning questions that they need to ask.
That's so crazy. So did you go to this retreat while you were already having therapy?
I think it was around the same time. I think it was pretty much the same. I think I was having therapy at the time. I think I may have just started therapy, and then this. So it was all happening at the same time.
It was all too magical.
Yeah, it was all happening. And my partner broke up with me just before that as well, so I had to deal with that, that loss, which I came to terms with quite quickly, because it seemed that I think actually maybe I had seen Muji just before, and then I was having the therapy, and then when she broke up with me, I'd kind of already understood that I was going to be okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd been given like this, I'd just been kind of brought into this thing that like, no matter what is happening for you, you're always going to be okay.
Yeah.
So actually the breakup wasn't all that hard on me.
Yeah.
I think there was definitely, I was initially really, really sad.
Yeah.
And I felt like she'd given up on it prematurely.
Yeah.
But within, a few days, I was just like, life keeps expressing itself, so there's so much beauty to be seen.
Well,
that like, I don't need to be worried about it as such.
It sounds like you just discovered something else, Right?
Like
so
I had a new relationship.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so when you just want to talk about that experience of like the golden light.
Oh, it was bizarre. It was absolutely bizarre. Honestly, it was like, and I started thinking like, I can't follow this too much, because like, if this is if the whole world is going to turn into this, like I'm not going to be able to live. Like, if everyone's shape-shifting in front of me, and if the whole world is glowing gold, how am I just supposed to go along and get on with my regular business?
Yeah.
But obviously, like, that was a particular moment which was really intense, and then actually I was able to kind of switch in and out of that, which was really interesting.
Wow.
I was able to kind of like go back from it and be like, oh, everything's normal, and then experience it again and switch in and out of it for a good half an hour. I was like coming in and out of it, and I wanted to go deeper, but something was like holding me back, like, no, if I go too deep then I'm gone.
Yeah.
And something like, then I'll be gone, and then what, where do I exist within all of this if I leave?
And had you ever experienced anything like that before?
Not so intensely.
Yeah.
I think I'd had similar looking experiences on hallucinogenic drugs, so I was like, I was making a connection between that and being like, wow, this is like what it's like what I visualize when I'm on acid. So I was like, I was like, wow, this is like,
I was gonna say, it sounds like,
it looked that way.
Psychedelic.
It definitely looked that way. It was like really, really psychedelic, like, and I was kind of laughing to myself as it was happening, and like, but then also worried. It was a really strange. Like, I was like, I've lost it. I was like, no, I'm here. I've lost it. So it was a really interesting one. And then I kind of, I'll tell you as well, there was another really interesting moment in that, when, because people are obviously like, basically someone will ask a question, they'll end up talking for anywhere between 10 minutes and 45 minutes with this particular individual.
Yeah.
And the point is that a question that's from the heart is, the answer is available to everyone. So whether it's not, you don't have to ask it a question. The answer that could be being given because of where it's coming from could be more meaningful to you than it is even to the person that was asking the question.
Yeah.
So there was a particular moment in it where it felt like I was coming to, like, this is my moment, and I was like having like a kind of heart palpitation, as though like I'm supposed to be asking my question now, but there was this nervousness that existed. So I was like, I just couldn't put my hand up to like see if I could. Bear in mind, there's like 500 people in this room, and I'm near the back anyway, so it's like I was much less obvious than I believed myself to be. I was just anyway. And then he said, like, are you going to come up and ask your question now? And I was like, he's like, yeah, it's time. Yeah. So basically, I didn't put my hand up. Something stopped me from doing it.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, but honestly, when he said it, it was like he was looking me directly in the eyes, and it's like the whole crowd had moved, and he was just going, "Are you gonna come now?" Like begging me.
Wow.
But actually, on reflection, it wasn't like the right time for me to go up anyway, because I realise now, like 3 or 4 years later, that like that was a really early stage of the process for me. Like that was kind of my first introduction to self-inquiry, as it were. So it was normal for me to have this really intense sudden experience, because I was looking from a place at a place that was really new to me.
Yeah.
So obviously there was so much going on that was like, wow, this is so intense. But actually that was kind of a very immature stage of inquiry, as it were. It was just the tip. You know, and to me it was like, I've seen everything, you know. If I was able to see what was basically like a trip, I've seen the core value. But actually I then would go on to spend like 2 and a bit years religiously watching almost every video that he'd ever put up. Which he does like 2 to 3 hour satsangs put up online, and I watched pretty much every single one, and I would watch anywhere from between 2 and 8 hours a day in like kind of deep contemplation, effectively going through the process as if the satsangs were happening in front of me. So not even that, there would be points that I wouldn't even be watching. I would be in complete eyes closed contemplation for the whole thing, just hearing it, being kind of guided, as it were, to keep sending the awareness back to, okay, there's so much movement, but then just to keep catching the fact that all the movement was observable, and the point of the pointing is what is observing.
Rewind.
Just keep coming back. Effectively, it's like what is observing. And within that like 2.5 years, there must have been like 500 breakthroughs, and and then equally 500 seeming to go back to to getting sucked into the kind of more periphery stuff that was kind of happening. As in like getting. So actually there were moments when there were moments of like what appeared as complete clarity. And I would probably describe as it was acknowledgement of just awareness, just basic awareness, and how there's such wonderful benevolence within that, which is like there's joy and all of that, but it's like it's actually just real peace, real just underlying like acceptance. And there can be other things happening at the same time, but there's also just this kind of like internal comfort, which I could I could be in any situation and feel like there was this, I was level, which I'd never really experienced. I was always so up and down, going from super high and happy and amazing, and what I perceived as really fun to be around to also being really depths of low and being probably not as miserable to be around as I was perceiving it.
Yeah.
But I was certainly experiencing it as like a fairly miserable time. So there was just suddenly there was this like, okay, and then there was within that there was like, I don't know, freedom to even when I wasn't feeling good, to be able to go and do the things that I probably thought I couldn't handle and be like, yeah, and handle it. And then there was just a lot of good times in that. But then there would also equally be, I was allowing the anxiety to really come up. So then there were, within that couple of years, some of the most anxious times I'd ever experienced were also arising within that.
Wow.
Where I felt it necessary to like really retreat, and I think I was then using the self-inquiry as a means of retreating and distracting myself, or trying not to be too heavily involved in reality, or the kind of manifest world. Just kind of, I have this thing that I can go back to. So it was fairly solitary at times.
Yeah.
Which I was really enjoying, because
Yeah.
I had something. I had that comfort that like I could happily go and spend 8 hours on my own in silence.
But it sounds like you kind of like, there was no other option, like you had to kind of do that.
Yeah, at the time it seemed absolutely like that was all there was.
Wow.
And that was
Yeah.
That
Like
was
such
me learning about myself.
Yeah. And such a strong draw towards it. Like,
yeah, there was nothing else. There was literally, everything was done through that lens.
Why do you think that was?
Why do you think it was?
I don't know, because I feel like some people, when they dip their toes in, sometimes they can be quite scary and they retreat back, or like it's not so consistent. They'll do a little bit, maybe they'll meditate a little bit.
I think that.
But you went in.
I think that for me it's because it was familiar, strangely familiar.
Ooh, nice.
It was like.
Yeah.
It was like I'd known that piece, but never known, or never had any explanation for it.
Yeah.
So although it wasn't consistent, this was giving me a way to nurture that. And in my head, then it was like, oh, if I nurtured that, then I can potentially have that all the time.
Okay, yeah. So you
I was like, and that's a place that I want to be.
And you understood that.
And I understood that. I understood that was genuine peace that I was experiencing.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So yeah, that was pretty powerful, really powerful. And then, kind of 3 years later, about a year ago.
Yeah.
I kind of stopped engaging in that way.
Yeah.
And that piece, like, it's there.
Constantly.
Yes and no. Like, I still have,
Yeah.
all kinds of movement.
Yeah.
But I don't need to go away to access it. Or to spend a long time with that in order to regain some power or anything. There's more of like, it was like that was enough time to recognize that the power is here.
Yeah. As in, like, you don't necessarily need to go to the stat signs and...
Yeah, I started to become even like a little bit disengaged from the stuff that Mooji was saying, because not because of particularly what he was saying, but just because at some point language became limited.
Yeah.
And he talked about that, and that's like, that's heavily spoken about. It's like, how can you talk about something which is comes before language, or something, how can we express something which...
Yeah, I mean...
Which everything, if all expression is coming out of this, what expression can then express the basis or the core of what that is? And I started to become quite disillusioned with that, to be like, nothing can really... I don't need the words anymore. I don't need the tools anymore. Those tools are just taking me further away from it almost. From the reality of what the essence of that is. Because the words and everything were pointing to the fact that the essence is always there.
Yeah.
So actually, I started to want to, or to realise that, like, I don't need to I don't need to gain anything more in order to be that or have that. It's actually getting rid of more. Recognizing that that is here already. Right?
I like that you call it magic. And then before, say, you had that experience, is it something that you felt before that?
I think that others may disagree, but I was always like quite charming and quite witty and like very really high energy a lot through like my childhood.
Yeah.
And I think that I always kind of was like, that felt magic. That felt like there was some magic coming through me in order for me to be capable of that wittiness. Like I didn't feel like I was like super intelligent or any of those things that were like why I was capable of those things. It felt like there was like, this is insane. Like it's like something about me getting out of the way that just allows this kind of like this to come through. So there was something that I felt like was magic. Yeah, I think.
And then I know like it's so hard, like you say, to describe these kind of things because words can be so limited. But what is the feeling that that you say, this essence that you feel inside? If you can describe it. Big questions.
I don't think I can describe it, but I can tell you that it's here.
Nice. Love that. That's nice.
And when you ask me that, it becomes very present.
Yeah.
But then, if I try to attach words to it, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah. So it can only be like, we can experience it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's almost it almost comes as like, when like something and someone knows something and you're kind of like but then neither of you have like discussed what exactly it is that you know, or you're like just that you can it's there. So there's no denial that it's there. But then if somebody goes, what is it, then it just and it's too changeable. I don't know if that would really be the right way of saying it, but the way that it's experienced or the experience from it is so changeable that I'd only be describing how it relates to my particular experience as opposed to what the essence of it is. I don't think I could ever touch on that essence.
Nice.
Yeah. But as you said, it's like I was filling up.
Wow.
Just like, am I going to try here?
Yeah.
Or like, maybe that can be transmitted. Maybe you experience that.
I mean, even still, just for you to share that, I think that's amazing because I think a lot of people don't know that actually, like there is more this experience of being a human, and I like what you said as well because you can only experience it.
Yeah, I find that the mind's answers can be a distraction from what it is,
as
opposed
so true.
to what it,
Yeah. Sounds like you've been on a journey.
Yeah, somewhat. Even now it's developing.
Yeah.
And I notice things. So I studied psychology, obviously, over the last 3 years as well, and that obviously, as you know, Jess. Is your name allowed to be out there? So that also gave another really interesting element to it, because then I started to understand the way the mind perspective.
Yeah.
And so then the talk of like conditioning and stuff that that came up in satsang, was given a real like tangible understanding, and now I just see my own conditioning day in, day out, noticing how my behaviour is, and even my answers to stuff, and things in like, particularly in like intimate relationships and those things, it's like playing out all these old stories like over and over and over and over. And then studying psychology showed me how that happens. And that just became really fascinating. So where I am now is really interesting because it might take a little time and I might have to experience something which is a little bit negative, but then can remove myself enough from that to be able to be like, okay, what's really happening here, as opposed to just like, I'm angry, I'm this and this, okay, where's that anger coming from, what's preceding the anger, etc., etc., or like, or this need for something, this like real need.
It sounds like it's kind of lightened the load.
Massively so. And also that I'm patient with myself. So I'll allow myself, for example, to experience the anger or the sadness fully, because then I can gain the insight from it having happened, rather than avoiding it. It's like, okay, let it really happen, then let's look at it, shine a light on that more. And then you can see, and then be like, wow, there's these patterns, that are coming from childhood. That are really destructive. Really, really like destructive, particularly like in future relationships and how we engage with our parents, and relationships that can often be challenging. So romantic relationships and family relationships are the two that are really, generally with your friends it's pretty good.
It's true, isn't it?
But
I find it,
romantic relationships and family relationships can be really complex. And I notice how things like what I think, a way that I think I need to behave to receive love is playing out. And then that also affects how I expect love to be shown to me. And these kind of things are just insane. These kind of things are just completely insane. And then to expect that actually you're going to see love in that way from another individual who's experienced it completely differently, who continues to experience it completely differently, it's just bonkers.
It's so true.
So I'm really grateful for the fact that I can remove myself enough from that to be able to observe it, and then that doesn't mean it's necessarily gone, but I can notice those patterns more easily, and I can begin to form new patterns. And almost reconditioning yourself. Which is weird to think like, okay, like let's decondition and then just let's set some new conditioning. It'd be nice to just not be conditioned, but I think living in the manifest world, there's certain conditioning which is like existing.
It's giving you that perspective.
But also realizing like, there might be other ways which I would like to experience it this way. Okay, so like I can start to change the way in which I approach these things in order to see them differently in the future.
And maybe now it's more like liberating or something.
Definitely.
Nice.
And again, like no fear of experiencing the pain. That because you if you're gonna change the way that you experience love, you're basically shattering your entire past, because your past has showed you that this is what love has always been. So if you want to experience it a new way, you have to shatter that whole understanding.
Completely, and that's exactly like you say. Every single day, we're just reenacting what we already know. And it takes a lot to recondition. It's not easy.
No, but I do think that gets easier. So that would be one of the things maybe that like. That's why now maybe before I needed that safe space of satsang in order to think that I could. I was safe enough to be able to go through that. Whereas now, I feel safe to experience that shattering and that changing in everyday moment. It can be happening all the time. And that there's safe because the satsang is here, right?
That's really nice. That just like showed you the way, and now you can do it.
And then to give gave you those tools.
Be like
And
amazing. And then
because now I don't, I don't really have any tools. I'd say every once in a while, stuff gets a little bit overwhelming, and I'll be like, almost for nostalgia, I want to go back and spend a couple of hours with Muji, just almost because then the sound of his voice is familiar, and like things like that, and getting to be in that, that's really nice. And I actually went on me and my partner went on a road trip where we hitchhiked across Portugal to get to his his home, Monte Sahaja, and hitchhiked and got there and went and spent an afternoon there and sort of sat down over in October last year. And that was really beautiful. And again, it was one of those ones where I felt like, oh yeah, I'm being called to the stage.
Oh really?
And again, kind of got there, and then actually in that moment, like, it was really relaxed for me. It wasn't like I was there like thinking like, oh, it's gonna happen, the breakthrough's happening. I spent most of the set time just like,
cool.
Nice. And like it wasn't that intense for me, and then again, I think that was what the realizing was, like, it doesn't always have to be intense.
Yes.
It doesn't always have to be like this crazy intense experience. It's supposed to be enjoyed and light as well, right?
Yeah, man.
Whereas that 2 years of like me being, 8 hours contemplation was like intense.
Yeah, it sounds intense.
Fucking intense.
Yeah.
So there's the light-hearted element of life and experience and stuff has kind of returned, and that's really a blessing.
Yeah, sometimes you need it though, right? The intensity and then...
Well, I mean, at the time it was clearly important.
Yeah.
And where I am now is...
light.
is a result of that experience.
Yeah, 100%. What, so if you were to describe this whole process that you've been going through for yourself over the past few years or 4 years, how would you describe it? I suppose, yeah. Yeah, difficult one.
Well, so the word that is initially arising is like acceptance. That's like the first thing that's kind of just arising, is like some kind of self-acceptance.
Nice.
So learning to come to terms with who I am, and actually maybe the nature of who I am being, and everyone is being so changeable. So like accepting change, accepting that there's not really necessarily a ground to like put your feet on. And then maybe before there was always this need for consistency. And like coming to terms with the growth of everything. And kind of being able to not need answers so much, just to kind of be, I suppose.
That's so true.
Yeah, maybe that feels true-ish.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know how else I would really describe it.
Yeah, I think you did speak about that a bit before anyway, like ways of your allowing yourself to just feel whatever, even if it's a negative experience.
Yeah.
That is acceptance.
Yeah.
And then, when you went in solitude for years and you came back, did you find there was like it was hard to like reintegrate into the physical manifest world?
Well, I never. When I say I went into solitude, I was still living in London, and I was still engaged. But there was something that was like conflicting during that time still. So like, I would go about the stuff that I had to go about, but then would retreat, and then I went to Canada, and it was a really different environment because I went to live on a university campus with like all 18 and 19-year-olds. And that was I found that really difficult. Really difficult, because like the first day I went in and I was just like, yeah, let's party. and then by like the first week, when I just wanted solitude, I was just like, oh fuck, like, all these people that I'd like in the first night been like, we're gonna have the most amazing semester, dude, and like these are like, you know, 18, 19-year-old guys who like I've been there, so like they're just so up for like excitement and partying like all the time, and then I would, you know, be like, sorry guys, I'm not gonna hang out this evening. And then like, you know, that for me like created a slight conflict, because then I was like, I felt like that wasn't the right space for me necessarily to be being that solitude. But again, that was a challenge that I had to like experience, right? And then coming back after that was like, it actually the majority of the change or the place that I kind of experienced myself being in now was from after coming back from that. A huge shift definitely happened in Canada. Ready?
Can I ask a question?
If you like.
What do you think was the most challenging parts for you?
Of the experience of the last few years?
Yeah.
Feeling like there was space to exist within this kind of new paradigm that didn't take me completely away from the world that I'd lived in before. So kind of there was this belief, I think, in the beginning as it was developing that like, wow, this is so different from my life before, so none of my friends will understand this, none of my family will understand this, and I'm going to change so much that I'm not going to fit into those things anymore, so like all of that is going to break down. Whereas now understanding more that like that's not true at all. Nothing really changes, you know, about me. Just how I kind of interact with stuff changes, but I can still, you know, it doesn't mean that I don't love all the same people,
it's still... and
you know, and or that I'm expecting them to change in any way. It's just
you're still here living.
That was I thought I was, you know, disappearing into a completely different universe. And I was like, oh, you know, how am I? So actually that was challenging, but is really beautiful. It's hard to say what's been challenging now, because none of it really seems challenging now.
Love that. It just is what it is.
All of it just seems like it was needed, and the challenges were overcome, and there will be more. Of course. And that they will be overcome in the way that they are as well.
Another thing I wanted to ask was, do you feel like this is like a never-ending journey? It looks like you've got both answers in your head.
There definitely is both answers to that.
That's so funny.
Yes, because life won't stop, right? It won't stop unfolding.
Yeah.
But changing. I think that there's like, I do feel like there's a coming, a like full acceptance, or a kind of coming to real peace with oneself, which stops me from needing answers, which means that whilst the journey is ongoing, I'm not in need of something.
You're not constantly looking. Yeah, that's really nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then if you had someone who was experiencing basically what you went through the past few years, what advice would you give them?
Don't listen to my advice.
Love it.
yeah, keep going.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you really want the advice, you can come and ask me. But I won't have an answer for it. I won't have the answer you're looking for.
Ooh. Amazing.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be alright. That would also be a good one, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I've had you say that to me as well. It's nice.
Possibly.
It's gonna be alright.
Yeah, it's going to be alright.
It's nice. And then I'm gonna ask you this open question. What does freedom mean to you?
Do you know what? The one thing that I thought that you were going to ask me, and that I had perused in my mind before you asked me it, and the answers that were coming to me before this moment, were that's like such a hard question to answer, because what freedom means to me in this particular moment is not going to be what freedom means to me. So like freedom to me right now might be like to get out of this room, like, you know. But again, I think actually having now had this conversation, it just goes back to the acceptance, and it's more about freedom to understand that I don't need anything else to get to where I believed that I needed to get to.
Oh my god, that's good. Say that again. Rewind.
Freedom is the freedom to know that I don't need anything else to get to where I hoped to be to. Basically, that there's nothing more that I need in order to be established, or to have value, or to be worthy. Just the freedom to be worthy of love. For existing. But then the things that came up in my mind around that were like, you know, freedom then is so different for everyone and for everyone's experience. And, you know, I'm very privileged, so I have a huge amount of privilege, which allows me to think of freedom in that way, which not everyone has. And I'm kind of only just becoming aware of my own privilege, and starting now to address some of those things and to look a bit more into it, and to hopefully begin to, in the future, think about how I might be able to broaden my understanding of freedom to what, needing other people to be free in order for me to be free too.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that your freedom is not just your freedom, right?
I suppose also what you said, it ties into everything really. It's not just freedom, right? Because to be able to not be looking, like there are things you can do, right?
Yeah.
Acceptance and like you mentioned. But yeah, it sounds like a very peaceful place.
More or less. More or less. Thank you.
And what do you think? Do you have any obviously this is going against what you're just saying, but like any idea of what the future looks like for you?
No. It's really interesting because I've had lots of creative desires throughout my life, and there's like a creative pursuit which I'm engaging with at the moment, which I would say I wouldn't have got to without the creative pursuits that I was doing before, even though it's kind of different in its own. So whether this is the one, or whether this is taking me to another particular part of the creative journey and the creative pursuit, I'll only know at some point, and maybe I won't ever know. Maybe I won't ever know. Maybe it won't ever culminate in some tangible part of, and it would have all been about the process.
But that's okay.
That's okay. It's okay. I'm engaged with the outlet that that I have for creativity at the moment, and then I also skip back to like the stuff that I used to do. So I don't really pursue music, as it were, anymore. But I still occasionally want to write a song and have that there, and that's
nice.
important to me.
Nice
to have that. But yeah, at the moment, like I have a project, but I find it hard to take these things too seriously. I don't know. It'd be nice to finish something. We'll see.
No, I like that about you, because silliness is key.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I find it really much too hard to like force myself to do stuff, which is a blessing and a curse. But you need certain amounts of discipline, and I'm not that disciplined, and that's something that I definitely think is like worth working on. And it's something that I'm kind of naturally working on now, but also at my own pace.
Yeah.
And what discipline means, figuring out what discipline means to me, as opposed to what everyone else's
That's
discipline
so true.
is.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, I don't want to add anything.
Okay.
There's enough here.
Okay, cool. And you don't want to say about
About my...
Just, your problem. No, I'm joking. Your book.
Is that what you were going to say?
No, it's just what you mentioned earlier about actually... Yes, boy. That actually looks pretty good. Just about like how actually, after having this crazy few years of transformation, now living is very just ordinary.
Yeah, I don't really know how to express that now.
Okay.
But how do you express that? Just that like, I'm not going out looking for magic now. Just seeing the magic that is already here.
Yes,
I think
love that.
There's your soundbite.
Cool, man.
Ciao.
Thank you so much.
No, mate, it was
For
a pleasure.
sharing.
That was really nice.
Thank you.
That was really, really nice.
Just remember that this is what it is all about. We were born to feel.